Act 1. I am Ava Bennett. I am 31 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, and my days march along with careful routine. A rhythm I have learned to trust after years of working as a graphic designer for a small but steady marketing firm that keeps the lights on and sometimes fills my evenings with color and noise and the soft hum of a computer that never seems to sleep. And I am careful and kind and a little shy about sharing too much of myself. And I have a girlfriend named Mira, who is a photographer with a bright smile and a voice that can make a room feel warm even on a cold morning. And our apartment is neat and full of plants and prints from our last trip to the coast. And I think I am safe in this life, and I think I know what love looks like in this city, where coffee shops line the streets, and the rain keeps a steady rhythm on the windows, until I notice small things that do not fit, little careful changes in Myra that I try to ignore. Because love is supposed to be simple and honest and predictable, and I have learned to trust Myra because trust feels like a shelter and shelter feels like home. But then the unexpected happens and the shelter starts to crack. The problem begins with a single look that lasts a blink too long. A phone that lights up with a name I do not recognize at a time when Myra should be ready to tell me about her day. A message that seems to vanish when I walk closer. And then the inside of me turns cold, because I know what that look means even before the words arrive. And I find Myra in the kitchen one evening with a coat off and a scarf still tied around her neck, and her cheeks a little pink from laughing. And next to her on the countertop, there is a mug that is not mine and a text message on her phone that she swears she did not see because she had her eyes on me. But I see it exactly, and I read it in a breath I barely catch. And the name on the screen is a coworker who works with her in the same company, where she has a desk and a camera and a dozen projects she talks about with a sparkle in her eyes. And as I stand there listening to Myra explain that it was only a casual dinner with a colleague who happened to be scheduled near her studio shoot, I hear a certain note in her voice that tells me there is more hidden underneath those words. And in that moment, I feel the ground shift because the life I trusted suddenly looks fragile. And I cannot pretend anymore that nothing has changed. And when I ask Myra to be honest with me, she buries her face in her hands and admits that she has not been faithful. That there is a coworker named Daniel who has made her feel seen in a way I never did. And I do not want to hear the details. But the truth lands on me like a stone, and I am left with a choice to forgive or to break. And I choose the latter because there is a line in the sand that I did not know existed until that night. And I am not ready to pretend that the hurt is small or temporary. So I tell Myra that I cannot stay in a relationship built on secrets and uncertainty. That I am ending things, and she tries to say she is sorry. But the apology feels hollow and rehearsed and not enough to mend the wound. And I feel a kind of quiet fear inside me that tells me the life I had is gone, and the future I hoped for is now a map with many broken paths. And the morning after, I pack my things in a quiet apartment where the air smells faintly of old coffee and rain, and I walk away with a small backpack and a larger sense of loss. And I do not cry in the hallway because I want to save the tears for a moment I can choose to let them fall, and I tell myself I will not become a person who wears sorrow like a cloak. I will carry it, yes, but I will stand tall for the rest of my days. Act 2, the second act, begins with Philip, the coworker who shares a name with many people who do not deserve a spotlight. But in this story, I have Myra and Daniel, a coworker who is not shy about telling me that he is fond of Myra and does not intend to apologize for it. And the shock of the breakup hits the work world in a way that feels loud and undeniable, because Myra and Daniel are colleagues in the same creative firm where I once drew color swatches for their projects. And I cannot entirely avoid their presence because our lives, even after the end of our relationship, still cross through emails and meetings and hallway conversations. And the office becomes a stage where every glance and every small gesture carries a message I never asked to read. And I begin to see Daniel as the nemesis in this story because he is the man who took what I believed was mine, and Myra as the person who holds the map to that loss. And I do not want to admit that I am hurt because I know how to stand tall in a breakup. But this hurt is not just a breakup. It is a betrayal carried into daylight and practiced in the hallways with doors that echo the footsteps of people who might have known and kept quiet. So I try to focus on work and on my own healing, on staying productive, and on filling the quiet nights with long walks along the river and the soft purr of a cat I adopted from a shelter, who has learned my schedule and sleeps at the foot of my bed and keeps me company. And I tell myself that I will not let this ruin me, that I will not become small or defensive, that I will build a new normal that does not revolve around their mistakes. But the problem keeps growing because I cannot avoid the way Daniel looks at Mira when a project is discussed, and the way Mira smiles at him when she should be focusing on her own designs. And I realize that their closeness is more than a simple friendship. And I even start to suspect that the company could notice the tension and decide to separate the two of them from the same team, which brings good news in one breath and fear in the next, because relocation could give me distance from the pain, yet it would also cut off a part of Mira that I once believed was mine to hold. And as the weeks pass, I find myself caught between a desire to protect my own heart and a need to understand what friendship means when the lines get blurry. And I begin to realize that the real problem is not the two people who betrayed me, but the way I have learned to trust too quickly and to forgive too easily. And so I attempt to move forward by redefining my life. By painting new walls in the apartment I share with not Mira, but a new sense of self. And I decide to confront the situation in a calm and clear way. And I request a private meeting with Mira and with Daniel to explain that I still carry the hurt, to tell them that I cannot pretend to be a partner when I am not, to set boundaries that will keep me safe. And when I speak to them, I am careful with my words, avoiding insults and choosing to be honest about my needs. I tell them that I have seen the distance between us grow and that it cannot stay the same. That I will not continue to share a life that includes a relationship with someone who cannot keep promises. And I tell them that I will step back from the work that crosses into any closeness that could reopen old wounds. And in that moment, Daniel does not apologize. He confirms that he enjoys the dynamic with Mira and that he does not intend to stop. And Mira admits that she values the connection, but she cannot pretend that it does not hurt me. And her confession brings a new wave of ache, but also a kind of relief, because the truth is out, and I no longer have to imagine what is happening behind closed doors. And as a result of these conversations, the company decides to separate them on projects and reduce their contact. And I see Daniel move to a different team and even a different branch eventually, which gives me a sense of distance that begins to feel like air filling my lungs, and I am able to breathe again. And I decide to take a new step by finding a small studio apartment to rent that is close to a park where I can walk in the mornings and think with less noise around me. And I begin a routine that is all mine. And I spend evenings reading books I had forgotten I loved and painting canvases that do not need to be shared with anyone. And there is a sense of slow healing, a quiet confidence returning. And while I am not in the dating game again, and I am not rushing into new closeness, I am open to the idea that love can arrive in a different form when I am ready. And I also begin to plan for a possible confrontation in the right setting, not to hurt anyone, but to close the door properly so I can step forward unweighted by the past. And I learn to say no with a steady voice and to protect my own heart by choosing places and people who deserve the light I carry. And although the path is not easy and I stumble with fear and doubt more than once, I keep moving, I keep breathing. I keep building a life that feels true to me, not a life built to please someone else. And I begin to accept that the old ordinary could not be recovered, but a new ordinary could be crafted. And the new ordinary is not about revenge in the cruel sense, but about reclaiming my right to happiness. And that realization becomes a kind of armor I wear as I walk through the city streets on mornings, when the rain begins to fall in soft sheets. And I feel the water on my face like a gentle reminder that I am still here and still growing. Act 3, the final act, opens with a renewed resolve and a plan that comes from a place of self-respect rather than vengeance. And I am not sure yet how I will test this plan, but I know I want to take back the page and write a different ending that fits who I am becoming. So I decide to try one last time to speak openly with Mira, not to shame her, but to close the circle so I can move forward. And I invite her to a quiet cafe that smells of roasted coffee and vanilla. A place where the walls hold soft light and the streets outside move gently, and I tell her that I have learned to bear pain with dignity, that I have learned to trust again with caution. And I tell her that I forgive her not to erase the hurt, but to grant myself the freedom to choose what comes next. And I also tell her that I will not be friends with the partner who betrayed me, that I will not pretend to share a life with someone who cannot honor the same boundaries that I honor for myself. And I ask Mira to be honest with me about what she wants, whether she wants to continue her work with Daniel in a way that could harm me again, or whether she wants to step away from our shared life to pursue a future that is separate from mine. And in that moment, the conversation becomes heavy, and the cafe around us grows quiet, and we both listen to the slow ticking of a clock and the quiet hum of the street outside. And Myra finally admits that she has feelings she cannot ignore, and that her choice is to step back from the friendship with Daniel and to evaluate her own path, which means she cannot stay with me in the same way, and she asks if I will consider staying in her life as a friend if I can accept this distance. And I tell her that I cannot pretend that the door is always open for the same kind of closeness. But I am not cruel, and I am not cruelly severing all ties either. And we part after a long and careful goodbye, with promises to talk again when the dust settles, and I leave the cafe with a heavy but hopeful heart, knowing that the last-ditch effort to force a perfect ending is not possible. And I accept that some endings are not dramatic, but quiet and honest. And I move forward with a plan that includes new boundaries, new living arrangements, a renewed focus on my art, and the knowledge that I have drawn a line that I will never allow anyone to cross again. And I begin to enact the final steps of my own healing by inviting a close friend to help me decorate the new studio I have rented, by painting a bold mural on one wall that reads in large letters that I am enough, by filling the room with plants and sunlight, by organizing a small gallery showing of my recent work and inviting neighbors and colleagues who have stood by me, and by letting myself feel pride instead of shame when people praise my paintings, and by speaking honestly about what I went through and what I learned about love and trust and power. And as the days pass, I settle into a new rhythm, a steady pace that fits my breath and the way the morning light spills across the floor. And the city of Portland becomes a friend again in its own stubborn way. And I realize that I have changed not because I have been hurt, but because I have chosen to grow through the hurt. And so the final resolution is not a spectacular triumph or a sharp cut of revenge, but a quiet win, a win of self-respect and the courage to begin again, a new normal that includes healthy boundaries, honest communication, and a life that feels finally mine. And if someone asks me what I would tell someone who suspects that their partner may be unfaithful, I would say this: listen to your gut, do not ignore the signs, protect your heart, and give yourself the chance to choose what comes next without fear. And I would also tell them that healing takes time, that the path through pain is not a straight line, and that the most important victory is not to punish the person who hurt you, but to rebuild yourself into a person who knows what love truly means and who can recognize it when it comes back, perhaps in a different form. Perhaps from a friend who respects every boundary I set, or perhaps from a new partner who will show me that trust can be earned and kept. And with that final thought, I feel a smile that I have not felt in weeks. A small but real spark of hope as I step into the Portland morning, the rain soft on my jacket, the river calling softly. And I know that this is not the end of my story, but the turning of a page toward a life that I choose. A life that is honest, creative, and mine alone to write. And that is the ending I can live with. The ending that makes me feel strong, grounded, and free. And in that freedom, I finally understand the value of truth, the power of forgiveness understood as a gift to myself, and the quiet but profound joy of choosing a future that I can stand in without fear.